FAIF, just from a business community standpoint, not healthcare specifically, we've had an IT council for several years, and I specifically myself got involved in a little bit of technology issues last year when the Attorney General advanced in some data breach legislation. And some of the things that I learned in that, just relative to just commerce and business, were astounding to me. And then this group is going to kind of take that one step further and explore the things that are fascinating and sometimes frightening, hopefully not, but sometimes frightening with technology. So to lead the conversation today, we have the privilege of having Representative Mia Jones here. She is the Democratic leader pro tem, as well as the ranking Democratic member on all of the healthcare committees in the Florida House of Representatives. And she is known as one of the leading experts in the Capitol on healthcare policy for our state. So it is my pleasure, and please join me in welcoming Representative Jones.
Good afternoon. Well, the one thing I noticed is that next time we have to make sure that Senator Bean is last, because he's so engaging that everybody would stay and make sure that they had an opportunity to hear him. So I can warn you now, I'm not a comedian, I'm not an auctioneer, and I don't have a game, okay? So as we go through today's final panel, what we really want to do is to be able to have a conversation with you, to be able to allow you to engage in this area and to really think through some things that you may not oftentimes think about because of the world that we currently live in. The two words that we want you to think about is our weapon and tool. Is it going to be a weapon, or is it going to be a tool? We're looking for the opportunity to make sure that as you hear about technology as it relates to healthcare, that you recognize that it can be both. And it depends on whose hands that technology ends up in. And as we are working through legislative processes, as we are having discussions about what's right for Florida, we have to recognize that we have to think about healthcare in both of those instances. So today we have three gentlemen who each have resumes that are phenomenal. And as I've talked to them and as I have done a little bit of research on them, I've recognized that there are things that are happening. I thought I was pretty well up on what was going on in healthcare and technology. So I still have a lot to learn, so it won't just be you learning today, but I'll be learning as well, and so I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists. Our first panelist that we're going to hear from is going to be Summer Kalan. All right, I got it. Dr. Summer Kalan currently serves as the Vice President of Business Development for Relay Health Pharmacy Solutions, a division of McKesson Corporation. In this role, he provides strategic leadership and new product innovation to promote medication-oriented information connectivity. In addition to previous practices, he has experience in a variety of clinical settings. Dr. Kalan has worked in telemedicine, which is my favorite area, electronic health records, health data networks, all during his time in the health information field. Dr. Kalan is an infectious disease specialist. You should have been in Jacksonville when I was dealing with TB. But he's a physician with a master's degree in healthcare information from the University of Central Florida, and he currently resides in Satellite Beach, Florida. And I'm not sure where that is, but we'll talk about that later. All right, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Well, thank you, Representative Jones. Can everyone hear me all right? Well, I appreciate the introduction, and thank you all for having me here today. So what I'd like to do today is to use some slides to illustrate points, but really talk you through some concepts around consumerism in healthcare, and more particularly related to medications. So for me, my job every day is to create tools, ideally not weapons, but ideally create tools that help implement some of the concepts that we talk about on a regular basis today, things like consumerism in healthcare, price transparency, value-based reimbursement. So really, I want to talk to you a bit today about how we take those concepts and make them a little bit more real. So before I proceed, there we go. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm going to really use these slides just to illustrate the concepts here. So first slide I wanted to use here is not a healthcare application. This is an app called Gas Buddy. So does anybody here use Gas Buddy to find out the local price of gas in your neighborhood? So I use this as an example because this is a great example of price-based consumerism. And the app really reflects the way a lot of us think about the way we purchase gas. It's a commodity. It's something that we generally see as consumers as being relatively the same from one gas pump to the next. It's really about price and convenience. Most of us are very price sensitive. We'll go out of our way to save 2 cents per gallon. Same way we are convenience sensitive. So, if there's a gas station at a right turn on my corner, I'll probably go there as opposed to taking a big U-turn to go to the one on the other side of the block. Now, I point this out because in some ways, and maybe I'm being a cynical doctor in saying this price-based consumerism that treats the gas as a commodity is perhaps the world we live in healthcare today, where services, products, they're heavily defined and commoditized, and the reward to those who provide those services is really volume-oriented. The more you can put out, the more money you make. And I think today we're moving away from that concept towards a value-based reimbursement world for our healthcare services. So again, as we think about consumers and how consumers think about other aspects of their lives, we need to develop tools that allow consumers to define and to utilize value the way they think about it in healthcare. So I'm going to use another example here, which is Amazon. So again, a lot of us use Amazon, again, very little to do with healthcare. This is my favorite book, Crime and Punishment, for anybody who hasn't read it before. Fundamentally, books are commodities in the sense that the words are the same. No matter how you read the book, what the format is, how old it is, especially a classic like this, the words are the same. And yet, if you think about the consumer principles that are enabled through a website like Amazon, we as consumers have a lot of different choices about how we want to utilize that book based on our value. So do I want a paperback copy, a hardback copy, a digital copy? Do I want to get a new or a used book? Can I read reviews, get opinions from other people? Maybe even see books that are similar that I might like to also explore and potentially choose instead. So again, really the concept here is taking something that's fundamentally the same no matter where you buy it, but adding an opportunity for value around that concept. And again, this really, I believe, is where we're going in terms of healthcare. As a consumer, it's really about the individual value, the personal value that you gain from the service, the medication, whatever the item is that's going to impact your healthcare. And so again, building tools that enable that sort of value-based reimbursement should reflect the incorporation of information that allows someone to make that informed value-based decision at a personal level. So medications, drug price transparency. I know there are some folks here that have a background in the pharmaceutical industry, but I think most people don't understand how complex medication pricing is. There are a lot of different factors that go into what any individual pays at the counter at the drugstore at any given moment in time. So I use the example of airplanes for those of you who fly a lot. Typically, no two people on any single airplane paid the same price, even though we're all sitting in a seat on the same plane going from the same A to the same B. It's very similar in terms of medications. There are a lot of factors that relate to supply chain, manufacturer costs, and benefit design, and all of that is constantly changing. So the price a person pays today may be different 6 months from now, even for the same medication with the same benefit plan at the same pharmacy. So all of these factors make it important to get really a real-time interrogation of what the benefit structure is today at this moment in order to inform the choice the consumer is going to make right now at this moment in time. There are a lot of people that are leveraging claims data nowadays to do analysis that helps feed a variety of medical decisions. What I'll point out is that claims data is outdated the moment it's generated. So again, being in a dynamic environment, we're really using retrospective data to make decisions that may not actually be correct. We're sort of leveraging, in some ways, misinformation. So going back to the idea of a tool versus a weapon, misinformation can lead to uninformed choices or poor decisions, and that's something that we want to avoid. Now, I will say there's a unique opportunity in the pharmacy space because the way pharmacy claims are done today is in a real-time manner. So at a moment in time when a pharmacy sends a claim, there is an immediate request and response that includes payment as well as a variety of elements that relate to the benefit plan. That's in contrast to medical benefits, which by and large are whenever. They're definitely not real time. You might get paid eventually. I can say that as a practitioner, tracking your 30, 60, 90-day AR for services that you've done is difficult. But again, as a consumer, and I've experienced this personally as a patient as well, you seek care with no real idea what it's going to cost. And even if you have historic claims data, that doesn't actually mean that that care will be reimbursed in the same way, in a way where you know with a high degree of confidence what you're actually getting, what you're actually paying for. So the opportunity here in the pharmacy world is that because it is real time, because it is highly accurate, money changes hands immediately, there is actually that opportunity to get pricing information on demand, prospectively in real time, to a patient, a prescriber, ideally both, and anyone who's involved in the healthcare decision making on behalf of that patient. So really that's the principle that's driving us in terms of the idea of informed engagement around value-based consumer decision making. Now, the other thing I'll point out here, just a few statistics, and I think many of us have experienced this. I think you can go to just about any busy street corner and you'll see about 3 pharmacies all on the same corner. What's worth pointing out here is that statistically about 92% of Americans live within 2 miles of a pharmacy. That not only includes suburban environments where there might be 3 in a corner, that also includes rural environments where the pharmacy may be one of very few, if not the only, healthcare access point. That includes urban environments where there may not be a lot of healthcare available, but there are pharmacies that are potentially available in that environment. And in addition to the idea of location, there's the issue of convenience. So pharmacies are generally open earlier, stay open late. Some of them are open 24 hours. And more than that, they're staffed by real people who have a name and a face with whom you can build a relationship. And I don't think that can be underestimated, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why. But as we look at the idea of getting value for price, we need to consider what are we getting into in terms of price, but also what is the value that associates with that price? What are the adjacent services? What's the additional information that we need to consider in order to make that informed choice? Now, there's quite a bit of literature out there today about medication adherence and what factors go into it. Medication adherence is a complicated problem. Cost is only one of several factors, and those factors are unique to any given individual. I'll cite one particular study, which was the FREE trial with 3 E's, and that was a study that was published in the New England Journal in 2011 and leveraged an Aetna benefit design on behalf of Aetna beneficiaries, looking at patients who are coming out of the hospital post-myocardial infarction. People have had a heart attack, leaving the hospital, and have medications on which they're recommended to be. They essentially eliminated the copay, so the drugs were free, so that's the origin of the name of the trial. And as part of the study, they tracked adherence. Now, the study was generally deemed to be a success in that adherence rates were improved, clinical outcomes were improved in a significant way, and there were significant dollar savings to the payer and ultimately the healthcare environment at large from making those medications copay free. Now, the hidden story behind that is that statistically, medication adherence, as defined by patients having a medication possession ratio of greater than 80%, meaning you actually pick up your medications and take them on an almost daily basis as prescribed, those rates were under 50%, and the improvement by making the drugs essentially free was only about 5%. So what that tells you is that price is certainly a factor in terms of patients being adherent to their medications and getting the value that comes out of that. But there are a variety of factors that feed into that that go well beyond price. That relates to a variety of things like convenience, understanding of the medications, education around them, as well as understanding of adverse events, what to do if you get side effects, how to engage in picking the right drug to match the side effect profile that's tolerable. And even beyond that, just simple things like being busy and forgetting to take your medications. It even happens to me, I'll admit. And so really when we think about the things that relate to an informed, value-based, consumer-oriented decision, we have to think about the things that drive getting the pill into the person, as the old saying goes, pills don't work in people who don't take them. So that said, I want to touch on how pharmacy is transforming today and how that really relates to the idea of wrapping value around the idea of price for the consumer. So if you look at the red box there, that's maybe the commoditized version, the gas pump version of the pharmacy, where it's really just pushing pill bottles across the counter and there's really not a whole lot else to do. Now, I will say the pharmacy profession as a whole has undergone a significant transformation over the years. Most of the pharmacists that you see today are now PharmDs. They're doctorates. They're people who have trained for years, have extensive medical knowledge about medications. They really are medication experts. And so we really can go beyond the gas pump mentality and look at a variety of other services that are starting to become more commonplace within a pharmacy environment. Some of those things relate to the pharmacist as a care provider and a medication expert. So services like medication therapy management, which is sponsored through Medicare and an increasing number of commercial plans as well, really helps get patients on the right drugs tailored to that individual, especially when they've got complex regimens. There are also associated opportunities for ancillary care. So for example, a patient with asthma who's stopping by to fill their inhalers might also be eligible to get a flu shot and also help prevent further sequelae of morbidity there. In addition, there's the importance of the pharmacist becoming part of the care team. So if there are services being performed, we no longer live in a vacuum where one person and only one person is responsible for that patient's care. It's a team-based approach that's becoming the norm today. And so coordinating care, engaging that patient on behalf of the care team becomes an important aspect of providing care and sharing data back, letting the doctor know, hey, your patient didn't actually come and pick up this prescription, or the patient came but can't tolerate it. You ought to talk to him or her, find out what's going on, and we'll work together to get that patient on the right medication. You also see certain things that even go beyond the scope of pharmacy. So that would include things like retail clinics. I think a lot of folks have seen the CVS Minute clinics, the Walgreens healthcare clinics. They're becoming more commonplace in the pharmacy environment. And also, if you take that even a step further, pharmacy is an environment that also generally incorporates retail. So, we've seen examples like CVS Health removing tobacco from their store shelves. Target has also done that for years. We're also starting to see pharmacies, especially those in a grocery store environment like a Publix or a Winn-Dixie, who are looking for ways to help engage the patients in dietary activities. You're going grocery shopping, you're here. Can I help you as a diabetic find diabetes-friendly foods? Can I help you avoid sodium if you have high blood pressure? All of these concepts will continue to evolve, but I think what really drives all of this is the idea of trust. And so, I'll say maybe I'm old-fashioned, but this is something that was ingrained in me from the very beginning of medical school. Healthcare fundamentally is about a trusting relationship. Patient who doesn't trust their provider will never really engage with that provider in a meaningful way. It's difficult to develop trust with a person on the other end of a phone in a call center, with an app that's on your mobile phone or texting you from a random phone number. It's difficult to engage people in a non-personal way. And so, some part of engagement is going to happen among peers, family, friends, coworkers, whoever it may be. But in addition to that, having a healthcare provider who's available on demand, long hours, with a name and a face, most likely will be there tomorrow, even if you don't have an appointment, and we'll be happy to talk to you. That becomes an important aspect of continuing to drive value and ideally drive outcomes for patients who are looking for more for what they spend, but also looking to spend for value, however they individually define that value. So, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about these topics, and my contact info is here if anybody needs it, but I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague here on the left.
All right. Next, we're going to hear from Jeremy Racine with healthcare strategist. He's a healthcare strategist with SAS state and local government practice. Jeremy has helped to drive the development of efforts for SAS healthcare analytics framework focusing on population health, claims analysis, Medicaid management, managed care analysis, and state employee health benefits. He's been pretty busy. He works within the public sector to identify and develop ways in which analytics can empower mobilization and enhancements across the healthcare continuum. Jeremy has immersed himself for the past 14 years in big data and analytics, including a comprehensive focus on healthcare and ways the public and private sectors can deploy technology to improve population health, including access to care, quality of care, and cost containment. He knows that analytics is critical to driving healthcare modernization and understands the complex implications of the Affordable Care Act, new care and payment methods, and Medicaid changes. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy Racine.
Thank you. So I feel like I'm the only person maybe up here from the Northeast, and so I know it's kind of laughable. Can you guys keep me down here a little bit longer? Because we've got another snowstorm. In all seriousness, I do wish sometimes analytics could help us to predict what's going on up there. 3 Mondays, 3 feet of snow. It is terrible, and I don't think anybody out here pretty much has to deal with that if you're from Florida. So on a serious note, thank you again for having me here. And I think there are just working at SAS. I've got just an entire laundry list of kind of stories where we've helped in the application of analytics. Certainly we've got an entire group dedicated to just working on the health and life sciences, and I've been working with the public sector here for several years. And I'm just going to talk about first I want to talk about a couple of real life stories that we've just been a part of, and they're always exciting, and I think they certainly accentuate the value of analytics out there in the health sector. So, recently we had just worked with Wake County in North Carolina, and so their EMS folks up there were basically interested in whether CPR and its efficacy basically on survival rates, if the 25 to 30 minute mandated CPR was actually relevant, basically. So basically, what we did is we worked with them. So over the course from 2005 to 2012, they maintained very careful data on basically every response to a heart attack. And so we took that data, and over time we basically looked at a lot of different factors. And what we basically came to find out was that by extending the time the CPR was actually performed beyond 30 minutes for certain indicators, that we actually saved over 100 lives in Wake County over that time. So thinking about whether it's a tool or a weapon, I think stories like that, and there's just a lot of them. I mean, they're out there, and so the ability to save lives, something we just wouldn't have that ability 20 years ago to be able to analyze data in that manner. And to say along the same lines, I feel like that's really kind of a very strategic focused area. If I look at a more macro level, we're actually doing some work right now called Project DataSphere. And so in that capacity, SAS is actually acting as a champion for creating a common platform for cancer research. And so when we do that is, if you think about what out there right now, so we've got basically all the pharmaceutical companies that are invested, of course, in clinical trials for cancer research. And what's fascinating is, for all these years that we've been doing all this great work individually, up until recently, there's really been no way of sharing any of that data, of course, across the pharmaceutical field, but also across the research community, the academic community. And so basically, SAS has stepped forward, and this is one of the things we're championing, was we want to create a common platform where we could share that data, integrate it, and basically give it out to the stakeholders that need that data. I mean, it's really very, very much cutting edge. I mean, until something, like this initiative, there's been no means for being able to share all that. And of course, I mean, it takes a lot to get to that point. We obviously have to get all the big pharmas to be on board with it and understand of course, the value in that, not just individually, but of course, just, across the, globally, what it means for mankind. So there's a lot of value in the kinds of things we're seeing out there in the field right now. So, I mean, let's just a couple of quick stories. And, from my experience, and I've had some discussions about this, I have been spending quite a bit of time with a number of states, and I'm not sure if folks are familiar with this, but, CMS has been facilitating quite a modernization effort across the states. All right, so there are actually 28 states just recently who got, if folks are familiar with the state health innovation plans, right? So there was almost $700 million that was released as part of that to help modernize a lot of these states. So I say 28 different states got different levels of this kind of funding. What's interesting is when you look across it, right, if we have questions about whether technology is important or not, I just point to something like that and say not only the feds and the states involved in an initiative like this, but $700 million to go out and invest in modernizing the healthcare infrastructure of those states. I'm talking about enhancing health information exchange efforts and going beyond just meaningful use in EHRs, right? Going well beyond that. Setting up super ACO-like organizations that will move beyond just the integration of clinical and claim data, but will push beyond that and go into like social service data and other administrative non-healthcare data. There's a lot of value in that. And this is being championed, again, by the feds and by the state. So I spent a lot of time talking to folks, reading these health innovation plans, and I certainly encourage you to go out there and read them because there is some fantastic information in them. These health innovation plans are big on interoperability, on taking a team-based approach. We just heard about the value, of course, of taking a team-based approach, and of course, moving away from fee-for-service and moving towards pay-for-performance, pay-for-value. There's what I've seen throughout these innovation plans is there is a tight correlation between service delivery and payment delivery. And you're going to affect change by changing one of them. You're going to change both of them, basically. So I think what we've seen, especially in some of the pilots across the nation, is as we change some of the things going on with payment, we've seen better care. And I think, again, that's due to the technology to be able to facilitate that. Could we envision 25 years ago being able to do a pay-for-performance model? How would you have even thought about doing that? What would you have for technology to be able to implement that? So, I mean, it's one of the things that we deal with a lot. Implementing a pay-per-value system is extremely complex sometimes. There are obviously more straightforward versions, but some of the more complex ones, like the things that we work with, we look at medical episodes of care, and being able to look at things like that and actually calculate the attribution of services and the cost variations and severity adjust things between populations and patients, it's very complex, as you can imagine. So technology is what facilitates that. Some of the other initiatives I've seen out there as well, there are of course extensions of the CMS 1115 waiver where folks are taking dollars saved from Medicaid reform efforts and reinvesting those into innovations as well. And I always champion too and say, if you're reinvesting money in the Medicaid system, there's a very strong correlation that you're investing really in the entire population, because a lot of the investments that are made at the Medicaid level, especially ones that are modernize the infrastructure, they don't just facilitate the Medicaid population. They end up spilling over, and actually you see a lot of benefits across the whole population, and I think that that's important to note. And the last thing I'll mention, on the national initiatives is we've also seen kind of growing from these SIM grants. So there's going to be in 2017, if you're not familiar with these, there's going to be innovation waivers. Innovation waivers will be basically the next breed from CMS of states and their opportunity to go and seek money for these types of initiatives. So I would certainly encourage you to take a look at those. And there's going to be a lot of value to be had there. And kind of an umbrella on all of that, like I said, CMS has actually created an innovation lab, which is looking at advanced data sharing, analytics, and the application across the sector. So, there is a lot of good work going out there from the feds, and I encourage you to read about it and understand more about it, because there's going to be a lot of it going on over the future. So what's interesting, As I kind of move from a national approach is, I was having a conversation yesterday with some great folks here at the conference, and one of the things they had asked is, in a hypothetical scenario where perhaps the state was not the recipient of any of these types of initiatives, and they had to look at dealing with things the way they are, then what are the kinds of things that could we actually do to modernize the system and realize change here with technology? I say there's a lot of things you can do. You don't just need federal dollars to be able to affect change. Okay, you have control over definitely certain aspects of the population. So if we look at Medicaid, for example, just in Florida, right? Florida's just obviously recently taken a dive into exploring managed care, long-term care, of course. And I'm going to mention that prominently because I think that what we'll hopefully see out of this initiative is that managed care works in Florida and that there'll be an aggressive approach towards more managed care. And to that point, as I've spoken with Medicaid agencies across across the nation, what I've heard is that a lot of folks wish they had been in the position that you all are in right now, which is you have an opportunity while you're exploring managed care to basically implement more analytic initiatives, more reporting. Think about those things ahead of time instead of just putting your head straight down on how are we going to operationalize it. And people think that analytic initiatives take like an epic act of God, but that it's not true. You can affect a lot of change with small initiatives. So what I would say is that Florida's in a position where they can do what these other states want to do. So I go and talk to other states, and it is much more challenging. You come in after the fact, and you've gone through a lot of pains with setting up managed care, and going through rate negotiations, contract negotiations, and you realize that there was a lot of data that you wish you had. You wish that you had better ways to make these data-driven decisions, and employing an analytic initiative is certainly something that I think that would be of great value, certainly here in Florida. I'd say, beyond that, of course, there's the looking at the detection of fraud, waste, and abuse. And actually, we've just recently engaged with Florida, and we're actually doing some work with that. And certainly, the ability to detect more fraud, waste, and abuse is something of great value. It's something you have control over. I mean, obviously, on the post-payment side, important to try to track down folks who are getting money. But I mean, let's be honest. One of the things that we realize is that it's extremely challenging to collect the check after it's been cut. So I think one of the things that we're looking at too is how can we be better on prepayment and at the eligibility level and make sure that money's not going out to begin with. And so that's a lot of the work that we also see. Another benefit of technology again. I can't even imagine again, and maybe that's a double-edged sword when we talk about technology versus weapon, because some folks may say maybe we wouldn't have to be detecting as much fraud, waste, and abuse if there wasn't such access to electronic eligibility and verification. And while that may be true, with the right software, with the right kind of processes and legislative support, there are ways to combat that and make sure that people are not getting money that's not deserved. So, and I'd say just a couple of other things here. One of the other areas that I think that we could probably see a little bit more work on is of course interoperability and integration across data. And so again, not just with Medicaid, but I mean with everybody. I mean, we're talking about ACOs, healthcare systems, the provider level, payer level. Everybody here should be interested in a more team-based approach to medicine and looking beyond just the data that they have. There's certainly administrative claim data that you have access to, certainly payers do and providers do. But geez, I know that there's a lot of work being done with the Health Information Exchange. So think about if we just started with that, getting access to your administrative claim data, but then understanding what the impactful relationship is with that between claims, looking at the clinical drivers of cost, and looking at the convergence there. Of course, going beyond that and looking at social determinants and other types of data sources that may affect things. And this is an area where, if for nothing else, it can be started in Medicaid. So in the Medicaid population, of course, there's a lot more control over that. And quite frankly, a lot of folks that are inside the Medicaid system are usually consuming other government services as well. And there's a necessity to understand what the impactful relationship is between all of those. Again, something I think analytics does a very good job of basically relaying. So I'd love to see it more of a push towards integrating more of those data sources and attempting to try to break down the boundaries. It may take some legislative support to be able to get some of that data sharing accomplished, but I do think that there's areas where it can be done. And I would actually point to some of the work that we're doing in Florida again and in some other states. For instance, looking at the well-being of children. So children that are in the foster care system or at-risk children in general. There's another area where you've got access potentially to education records, to healthcare records, to social service records, to criminal justice records. And you can look at basically all the different causal factors for why a child might be at risk for abuse or neglect or any kind of other negative outcome. You could take a look at all that data collectively, kind of risk score it, right? And then understand, there's an 80% chance that this child is going to have a negative outcome. And so while it's important to understand what facilitated that: technology, integration of data, analytics, and then we go beyond that, of course, and we say, well, we understand that there's a possibility for negative outcome, but we also can look and model what the best combination of services is that may actually mitigate that risk over time. And so we can look at disposition data over time and say, if we take this different blend of services, this different treatment plan, and we take this all together, this child has a much, much better chance at a healthy outcome. So I'd say that, as I talk here, I feel like I could talk forever about analytics and some of the great value, but I think for now, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions afterwards.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Next, we're going to hear from Nathaniel Lakeman. He's a partner with the Foley & Lardner law firm, and he specializes in the area of healthcare, named Law Firm of the Year from the Healthcare Law for 3 years, Healthcare Law for 3 of the past 4 years by U.S. News and the World Report. One of his primary practice areas is telemedicine and telehealth. He advises a range of providers, including hospitals, clinics, physicians groups, on the opportunity, business models, and regulatory issues presented by innovative healthcare delivery approaches. He has advised clients on telehealth issues locally, nationally, and internationally, with a particular focus on the U.S. and China in telemedicine arrangements. A true believer in healthcare innovations, he is a member of the American Telemedicine Association, the Healthcare Compliance Association, and the American Health Lawyers Association. He is very busy. He is a graduate of the University of Florida and the University of Southern California School of Law, and now he lives in Tampa. Nathaniel?
Thank you, Representative Jones. And I'd like to thank AIF for having me here this afternoon to share some interesting and exciting new projects that different companies across the United States are doing. When Tammy invited me to speak, I said, well, tool, weapon, what is this all about? I don't want to have sort of a fear-mongering presentation because I really believe in the optimism presented by a lot of these innovative technologies. So what I'd like to do is go through a handful of some products and services that are out there right now. We can talk about the promise and maybe talk about the weapon side. And not necessarily how these products may be used as a weapon, but how and who would view these products as a weapon. You can use the word innovative technology to synonymously describe the same product as someone else would describe as a disruptive technology. Okay? It all depends on your vantage point. What I personally would like to see, because I love Florida, I'm from Florida, my wife is like a 6th-generation Floridian, is that we see more business growth and development in innovative healthcare. We certainly have the population to support it, and it's disappointing to me sometimes personally when I see, all this activity going on in the Northeast United States or the Northwest United States. Not to knock those areas, they're great areas to live if you live there, but I want that in our state, and I want us to be able to do things to help promote it, facilitate it, and catalyze it. So let's focus on the opportunity. I think we understand from the speakers earlier today, and if we haven't, really the point needs to be driven home. The technology is not in and of itself the answer. It will not do anything. It is merely a conduit through which you will provide meaningful healthcare services in any particular way or form. Okay, so we need to have that humanizing element. We've had speakers, and I think they did a fantastic job talking about patient engagement and the user interface, and that is a hugely important part of the process, okay? Let's talk about some new approaches. Personalized medicine, or what the president referred to as precision medicine, right? That's one that's coming out. You use it a lot of cancer and oncology products. Big data-enabled medical diagnosis and decision-making. This is a really exciting tool. Algorithm-assisted diagnosis, particularly in primary care, or patient-driven remote monitoring and telehealth services in connection with the quantified self-movement, which is sort of continual self-tracking to develop and ascertain your own baselines. All of these are really neat platforms and vehicles through which health tech products and services are offered. But what do they require? You might be thinking money. Well, maybe yes, but really what they feed on is data. They need that big data in order to create the corpus through which they can actually mine it and provide meaningful results. One easy example is genetic counseling services. In order for you, if you get genetic counsel tests, even if it's just that $150 23andMe or whatnot, in order for you to actually have any meaningful insight into what your numbers are after the human genome has been tracked, is how does this compare to trends seen actually in our patient population, right? At the beginning of our panel, we had about 43 people here, and now I think we have maybe 47, give or take. That's great if we compiled all your data and mined it. But I would like to see that 43 million people, right? Companies are doing that right now. They're focused solely on the data, and there are companies that are populating their own de-identified patient data for that same purpose. You couple these innovative platforms with what we really see in the industry as a blurring of the lines between the traditional payer-provider separation. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we had a number of speakers here who are representing health plans and payers. They are the source where patient money is directed in the healthcare marketplace. Patients are not quite as able to directly speak with their dollars in healthcare as they would if they wanted to buy a car, right? They give it to insurance companies who then help provide the network of providers. We see these insurers are now doing direct investment of those funds into ancillary service technologies for healthcare tech and offering their own wholly owned subsidiary de novo direct-to-patient provider platforms, telemedicine-based physician consults owned by a health plan, because these plans realize A, it can be an external revenue generator, and B, it can help improve patient quality of care for their enrollees, thereby reducing overall costs to the plan. So we see plans moving into the provider space, and we see providers moving into the plan space by taking more risk-bearing contracts, value-based purchasing, wanting to be part of the HCO models where they are responsible for a broader spectrum of the patient healthcare management, in return taking on risk in the form of capitated per member per month payments. Slam those two together. What do you get? Well, you get some cool opportunities. Let's say I could tell you you have a device, a wearable. It'll continually monitor seamlessly, wirelessly. You don't need to press a single button. Your heart rate, your body temperature, your perspiration, your calories burned, your steps taken, and it'll send that to an app. It'll give you trends and chart data. You can export it into actual like Excel files if you really want it to be like hardcore and use SAS to mine the data or whatever. And then it'll also send you text messages and telephone calls and calendar reminders, and you can have it. That sounds great. I mean, I'm literally wearing that device right now. It's only $200, and it's already a consumer item. I mean, it works great. It tracks sleep as well. So that's a simple example. Everybody thinks that is a fun device. It's a consumer device. That has healthcare implications for the quantified self. Everybody's heart rate and blood pressure is not always the same. When you go into a doctor's office, you get that white coat effect, and it goes up. I don't want to call those readings when you go to your doctor meaningless, but they're nowhere near the level of accuracy as a baseline measurement read continually over a span of 30 days. You may just run hotter than somebody else, and that's okay, provided your baseline is still normal within your body. How you obtain that data is a whole nother question. Here's another example. Refractive eye exams, for your glasses. On your computer at home, you take the examination, it gives you a clinically accurate measurement, then you can click the button to order the frames you want, including your pupillary distance measurement, and have that mailed to you, boom, no problem. That's an innovative delivery that is available today. To whom is that a weapon? Well, if I am an optometrist with a brick and mortar practice and I'm just used to that, having people come in, that is a weapon to me. I view that as a threat. How do we as a state reconcile that? Patients may want it, consumers may want it, the optometrist group may not want it. That is a telehealth technology. An addiction therapy support app, right, that learns from the patient's user experience, has an initial intake of the patient profile, provides responsive feedback, and changes the types of motivations and trackings sensitive to the patient's particular uses, whether it's for smoking cessation, like an ADHD or whatnot. What about that? They have those already. Now, how do you feel about that if you're a mental health professional or you're in the substance abuse addiction therapy services? You may feel threatened by that. Would you feel the same if you knew that it was clinically proven to work? Right? That's a balance. That's a balance between the face-to-face relationship that you would have with the patient and your business interests versus here's a really potentially cheap, clinically effective tool that could be folded into your practice. And I use that as an example because mental health is one of the early adopters of telehealth communications. It's very powerful, and they're one of the best utilizers of it. Second probably to teleradiology or telepathology, which has been used for several decades. Wristify. Has anyone heard of this product? It's fantastic. It looks like it's been designed by Paloma Picasso at Tiffany's, right? It's a shiny bracelet. And what it does, it uses thermoelectric bands to heat or cool. Now, your actual core body temperature doesn't change, but studies have shown that your sensation of perceived temperature is significantly affected by heating or cooling your wrist area. They have workout studies. If a guy does try to do 15 reps on the bench, puts his hands on really cold metal, you can knock out 3 more reps immediately because the body feels refreshed. So whether you do cold or heat will change your sensation of pain and your perceived comfort level. There's already studies being put into place to use Wristify in connection with lumbar punctures, right? Or dialysis therapy. I mean, sitting there having your dialysis services done for several hours, same with cancer infusion, can be incredibly uncomfortable. You don't want to have the entire room warmed up to 80 some degrees and make all the staff uncomfortable or have big heat lamps. Just have a little bracelet and it enhances the user experience. Health plans. We've heard a couple people talk about transparency in health plans, which is excellent. My friend, she just joined a startup health plan that's going to have full transparency. The subscribers or the enrollees will know not only what every single service, whether it's a physician consult or an imaging or whatnot, will cost, they're also going to know what those providers get paid. Right? Now that is incredible level of transparency. Who views that as a threat? I mean, a lot of people. Other health plans, because this is a publicly available fee schedule now of otherwise confidential contracted rates. Other providers, they may feel threatened by it. Oh, this doctor's willing to accept this kind of money. These are changes. And then next level stuff. If you have a chance, Google's Baseline project, it's fascinating. They came out with these ideas for injectable iron nanoparticles go into your bloodstream. You have a wearable that has some magnetic sensitivity, and it will monitor the amount of these iron nanoparticles that flow by it, and that will designate the progression of your disease state if you have cancer or disease. And then all that readings on the wristwatch will automatically upload to your provider. They have a contact lens for diabetics that measures automatically your blood sugar levels and transmits that data wirelessly. Those are really exciting, but those are scary, right? Not only do you have to worry about, if the police are going to know where I am based on my GPS and my cell phone, they can find me based on my blood or some nanoparticles in my blood. Those raise serious privacy concerns, right? Beyond just simple healthcare, but they're all applications in healthcare. And that's different from security. So I think in order to harness a lot of these advantages, you're going to have to necessarily give up degrees of privacy because the data must be shared in order for it to be collated and then mined in any meaningful way that you can enjoy as a patient or a consumer user. And then the security, we read last week, 80 million patient files were hacked. And as I understand from the initial reports, it's not even a software failure. You know, it's the equivalent of they didn't drill a hole through the side of Al Capone's safe. All they did is found somebody who gave up the combination. So you could have the most ironclad software, but if someone is able to phish and obtain the combination lock, you know, they're going to be able to get in. So I think security is a whole different issue from privacy. We certainly have another people or threat would be resistance from the existing models who might feel threatened or reactionary to it. I do feel, though, that in Florida we can put a lot of faith, or at least I would, in the administrative agencies, namely the licensing boards who have been delegated the authority to have oversight over our healthcare practitioners. It's really clear right now under Florida law you can't provide healthcare services unless you have a license to do so, whether you're located in the state providing it or whether you're sitting in Texas and providing that via telemedicine. The Board of Medicine last year issued some regulations which I thought were very well thought out and had minimally obtrusive yet maintained standards specific to telemedicine practice. And I think those agencies can continue to execute on those requirements. Finally, I think another risk or a weapon area, if you will, would be some of these tech advances. They're really exciting and they make news, but they're not actually utilized by the providers. Why is that? Because there are not sufficient financial incentives for them to do so. Right now, fee-for-service is the dominant compensation methodology, and they're so used to receiving the corpus of their reimbursement from the Medicare program or Medicaid, and even under a lot of the managed care contracts are still fee-for-service based. So if we switch to more capitated or risk-bearing models, I think you'll see more of that. I think also if Florida, for example, were to pass a piece of legislation that has commercial payers cover telemedicine, healthcare services provided via telehealth, that could change things by ensuring that there's dollars in that private market sector to fund it. But we'll see what happens with that. And those are just some really cool new projects and some stuff I wanted to think about and share with you guys.
Thank you so much. Let's give our panel a hand. I'm going to start us off with a question, and each one of you will have an opportunity to answer it from your different vantage point. If you had an opportunity to influence the legislative process for your particular area, what would be one area that you would want to recommend that the Florida legislature look at, and how would you identify it as a tool versus a weapon? You want us?
Can I go first? Sure. All right. So I'll take a stab at it. So in terms of the work that I'm doing around consumerism and the idea of making more information available for engagement, I think the biggest thing is really around privacy and information sharing. Now, a lot of that is done at a federal level to some degree, creation of standards and federal regulations that help guide how we implement things. In the state of Florida, though, there are some unique regulations that also create some degree of challenge. So, you know, for example, and this moves a little bit towards the idea of telemedicine, so you may be well aware, but you know, for example, in Florida, we've had a challenge with controlled substances and pill mills, which led to, I think, well thought out legislation to prevent particularly the online prescribing of medications that, you know, that potentially could represent an abuse of the system. At the same time now, as we have different ways to continue to engage patients, and telemedicine being part of that, there are now actually barriers in place. So there are things that are done in Europe, for example, that we would love to be able to bring here to the U.S. And on a state-by-state basis, there are barriers, Florida being one, where there are ways to engage patients virtually, you know, audiovisual, still with a relationship, but which are inhibited because of laws that were created for a good purpose, but could never predict the future of the way those technologies could be created. So I think that's one example, but there are all sorts of micro examples of regulations that were appropriate at the time they were created, but with the way technology moves so quickly, they may need to be amended. And it's certainly easier to say than do. I know you don't snap your fingers and make things happen in Tallahassee, but you know, those really are the sorts of things, if we can keep up with some of those gaps in the legislation, then, you know, we can continue to innovate in a way that drives these sorts of opportunities.
Jeremy?
So I think you'll hear this over and over again. We just heard a little bit right there. I would approach this from a, I've heard a lot across states, and I would love to see it here in Florida as well, you know, the concept of a 360-degree view of a citizen, for instance, right? And that doesn't just apply to healthcare. Like we had talked about earlier, there's an idea of understanding the impactful relationship between healthcare data and almost any other data source that there is. Its impact with social services, its impact with education data, with criminal justice data. I mean, healthcare is involved. It's a corner, basically. You know, it's the center of all of those types of data. There's impacts from all of them. And healthcare itself impacts all those areas. I mean, we could go into it forever. Its impact on mental health and criminal justice system and all the other areas. But to really be able to get to that point, like I said, we could start with the Medicaid system, for instance. But I'd love to, you know, maybe we can start there. But legislatively, I understand that there are challenges with, you know, in every state with trying to break down the barriers between state agencies and even in the healthcare community in general, and making it, you know, slightly easier to share data cross-agency, to make sure that handshaking is going. I've seen some amazing efforts in other states that have begun to break down those barriers, and I think it starts with the legislature. And when legislative support is there and the barriers are broken down, we see initiatives that are absolutely cutting edge and are able to save lives and affect true positive outcome in the healthcare community and beyond. And I think I would definitely start there.
I would say if the legislature were to pass a healthcare innovation bill this session, the subject that would have the most impact on healthcare technology in Florida development would be a bill ensuring that commercial health plans cover telehealth-based healthcare services to the same extent that these plans currently cover the services if provided in person. I think that's important to ensure that there is capital in the private marketplace to incentivize this development and the use of such technology and innovation by providers. I think it does not impact the ability of the plans and providers to privately negotiate whatever their particular rates are. And personally, I would be in favor of something that's equivalent but not equal to their fee-for-service or their in-person schedules, because these are different utilizations, and I think the parties ought to be able to make that determination. I do applaud those plans that have proactively elected to move into the market and reimburse providers for services provided via telehealth. And I don't think that any utilization review should be limited in that sense. But I think if that's one thing that could be done, I think that's fantastic. In connection with the work that I do, you know, I've read the telehealth laws of every state and all the regulations across the country. And so I'm able to sort of see some of those trends. Florida is the largest state not to have such a law. 22 states already have it, including New York, and 6 states have such legislation currently pending in session right now.
Now, as we get ready to wrap up, do we have any questions? We got time for one question from the audience. Do we have anyone that has a question for our panelists? All right, all hearts and minds are clear. If you would, give our panelists a round of applause. Today we've heard from them, and we recognize the importance of ensuring secure patient safety and satisfaction while providing instant and accurate access in challenging opportunities. So today we know that we've heard a lot, and we know that we have a long way to go as it relates to healthcare technology. But know that as long as we work together and we allow minds to be open to all of the opportunities that are there, I think that we will definitely make a positive impact on our state. Thank you so much.